enter into the 21st century and go paperless today and use my tablet as I preach, but I have a backup just in case. And wearing suspenders and no belt. Some of you know what that means. So let's take an imaginary trip into the future and pretend it's next month, hopefully, and Donald Trump has been impeached. And he's out of a job, and so he goes to Indeed.com and he finds a posting for a position as a college professor teaching nuclear physics. And he thinks, sure, I can do that. I've been the president. So he sends off his resume. Well, this college is pretty desperate to fill the position, and there aren't many out-of-work physicists, and so they figure, what the heck? And they hire him. So how many would sign up for that class? Tons. None of you. Good. That means we do finally have some sense. We might elect him president, but we won't listen to him talk about nuclear physics. We have our priorities. Well, Mr. Trump is an example, a very good example of what our gospel reading is all about. He's a person who has authority, but does not speak with authority. And when he speaks, we cringe instead, wondering what thing he's going to say next. And so he's the kind of person that just blows a lot of hot air. Amen? Amen. All right. So we're now in the third week of the church calendar, in the season of Epiphany, and this season is about discovering new things. It's about having that aha moment when we hear the stories of Jesus and we hear them again and we understand them in a new way. And we do this before the season of Lent when we begin to prepare for Easter. Now we're only 20 verses into the first chapter of Mark in our lectionary readings. And already a lot has happened just in this first chapter. Because Mark is the Cliff Note version of the story of Jesus. How many remember Cliff Notes? They got me through high school, English Lit. For the young ones who don't know what they are, they're condensed versions of books, and they also had stuff about the themes and the structure, and so it made it real easy. You could sometimes read the Cliff Notes and get through your class without having to read the book. So Mark is like that. After Jesus was gone, people began to realize that they needed to write down the things that he said and the things that he did, or else they'd lose it. And so there were probably several people who took notes and wrote a lot of these things down. And then they started floating around and getting copied, and people would edit them and add to them and change them. And eventually that's what Mark did. He took one of these sets of sayings and he made it into his book. And he didn't take a lot of time to add much embellishment. So scholars believe that Mark is probably the most authentic of the Gospels because it was the first written, and it's also the most accurate because many people were involved in creating it. And for me, it's my go-to Gospel. When I want to know what Jesus said about something, I see what Mark said first, and then I go to the other Gospels. Because I believe that Mark has that authority. Now every day we see examples of people who speak either through their words, or through their actions, or through their money, but they're just full of hot air. They say one thing and do another thing. Amen. And we use the word hypocrite for that, or Republican. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Yes, I did. And it's on tape. Well, there was a lot of them in Jesus' day, just as there is today. And the people were tired of it. In the Jewish tradition, there's another set of writings in addition to the scriptures, the Torah, and it's called the Midrash. And it's basically a commentary on the scriptures that have been written over hundreds of years by lots of different rabbis. And when a rabbi had gained a certain following and gained a certain set of prestige, he could write notes add notes into the Midrash. And so then they would just be added and added and added. And later, teachers would then use the Midrash to quote and make their point. So explaining a text would get very, very confusing. It would be like, Rabbi so-and-so said XYZ, and then Rabbi such and such said ABC, and then later Rabbi this and that said AZBX. You get that? Yeah, it's confusing. But Jesus comes along, and he talks about the Torah. But he doesn't quote anybody else. He doesn't add all that gobbledygook. He spoke in a way that people could understand. And one day there was this deeply disturbed man who starts making a scene, and Jesus speaks a word, and the afflicting spirit leaves the man. Amen. So not only does Jesus speak, but what he says works. It has power behind it. And that's something that our world needs today, desperately. We need churches and church leaders and people that don't say one thing and then do another, but they say what they mean and mean what they say. We have enough politicians to fill the role of the people that do one thing and then say another. We need spiritual people who, when they speak the truth, we know it. One of my favorite authors is Bishop Stephen Charleston. He's a Native American and a bishop in the Episcopal Church, and he writes a daily devotional on Facebook. And this is his post from Thursday. What is worth saying does not need to be shouted to be heard. Truth speaks with a power of its own. It goes deeper than hearing, entering into the hearts that will receive its challenge, changing minds that were once closed, opening the vision of women and men from every culture, and strengthening them with the resolve of the community that it creates. One true word whispered has more authority than all the rhetoric that money can buy. Listen. The sound of change moves among us. The word for which we have waited has already been spoken. Amen. Now, how do we become the kind of people who whisper one true word with more authority than all the rhetoric money can buy? How do we become an authority like Jesus? Well, the first step is obvious. We need to know what we're talking about. Don't you just hate it when you get stuck with somebody who's a know-it-all and they just keep blabbering on and they talk about anything? Or when you go to one of those mandatory training sessions that corporate has set up and the preacher comes out and just reads the PowerPoint to you and really has no clue as to what it's like in your job. Best Buy is another example. You go in and 12 people ask you, "Can I help you? Do you do you need anything?" And then when you finally do have a question and you ask, they don't know. Amen? You know what I'm talking about? Or they have to read the box. It's like, I can read the box. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. You need to know what you're talking about. And if we're going to know what we're talking about, we need to do the work of learning and growing. Amen. We need to do the work of learning and growing in our spiritual walk. Jesus spent time in the temple when he was young. That's when he read the Torah. That's when he got to know what God was saying and doing in the world. And so he had that first-hand knowledge when he became an adult and began his ministry and was able to speak knowing what he was talking about. And second, we need to have experience with what we're talking about. It's one thing to have head knowledge. It's another thing to live out, to apply what you know in a way that makes sense. It's called common sense. It's called wisdom. It's called knowing how to use the knowledge that you have. And that comes only from experience. And in Mark's Gospel, Jesus had that experience. Immediately after he was baptized by John, the heavens open and there's a voice that says, "You're my beloved." And then the Spirit drives him out into the wilderness for 40 days, for a time of trial and testing. And that was his experience of the knowledge that he had gained. And he comes out of that experience through the fire refined on the other side of it. And I think that's one thing that has hurt the Christian tradition more than anything else, is that we believe, or we say, once saved, always saved. Say the magic words and you've got the magic ticket into heaven. And we negate experience. We negate making the word real. We negate the struggle that we have to go through. I know for myself, I did that. I said the magic words when I was a kid. But I had to struggle with it. Especially when I came out to myself and God and my family. I had to put those two pieces, all those pieces of my life together again. And it was hard. And many of us know that struggle. And some of us are going through it right now. But it's that experience, it's that trial, it's that wilderness that gives us what we need to speak with authority.
Amen.
Not just saying what somebody else said 1,000 years ago or last year or what's in a book, but what we really know. I know I'm saved because once I was lost and now I am found.
All right.
I know what that means. And that's what we need. We need to take our knowledge and our experience and bring them together. And finally, we need to allow the Spirit to give our words power. More often than not, we're not much different than Mr. Trump. We rely on our own personal power in order to give our words meaning. And our own personal power is very, very limited. It really doesn't go very far, even though we think it does. We think that our position, our privilege, our race, our possessions, our gender, our sexual orientation, on and on and on. We think all of these earthly things give us some type of authority, some type of place. But that's not God power. That's power over, not power with. Power over is where we seek to get what we want. We want to control and manipulate stuff to our advantage. That's not the way God works. That's not God power. God's power is power with. It is Emmanuel, God with us, God stepping out of heaven to come down here and showing us and sharing with us the power, which is the Spirit. The Spirit being given to the church, the Spirit infilling us. And we have that Spirit within us, but we need to connect to it.
Amen.
When we speak. We need to connect to our spiritual source. However we do that, however you do that, we need to take the time to still the noise of the world and connect to our heart and soul to that which is outside of us, the God Spirit. Jesus was able to bring people back to the place of health through his words because he knew they were not his words. They were God's. That he was God. He and God were one. And so he had that power, and we need it too. So later today, we're going to gather for our annual church forum, when we will present our plans for the future and ask questions and dialogue about our faith community. And it's all mundane stuff, or so it seems, but it really isn't mundane. It really is the work of the church.
Amen.
It really is a liturgy. And it's the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts. And it makes us who we are in this world. And it's my prayer for us as we go into that time that we will be a community that speaks with authority to our world. And we will use all of the tools that we have to speak. We will say what we mean and mean what we say. And the power of God will be within us and behind us, bringing health and healing into our world. Amen? Amen. Would you pray with me? Heavenly God, we thank you for the word that you spoke to this world through Jesus. We thank you for the authority that he spoke with and the power of the Spirit that he held, which he gave to us. May we connect with you in order to allow that Spirit to live in us and speak through us. This we pray in your names. Amen. Amen.